Pattaya. This name evokes different reactions from those who hear it. For some, it is synonymous with partying, freedom, and a carefree lifestyle. For others, it is just another saturated tourist spot in Southeast Asia. But what few people do is confront this city head-on, with their eyes wide open, and without the filters that usually obscure its true essence. That is exactly what I decided to do. Walk along Beach Road with a camera in hand, attentive eyes, and an open heart. No cuts, no rehearsed script, just a faithful record of what it is like to be there, in real time. The idea of this video is not to sell you a dream. I don't want you to finish watching with an idealized image of a perfect place or an exotic paradise. It is also not about exposing problems or criticizing different cultures with a foreign gaze. It is, in fact, an attempt to show what my eyes saw. And perhaps, who knows, it will help you see Pattaya in a more human, honest, and complete way. Many people who visit Thailand pass through Pattaya, but few stop to truly understand what it represents. Many see the lights, the bars, the parties, but few try to see what lies behind the vibrant facade. Beach Road is more than a seaside avenue. It is a microcosm of the entire city. There, in just a few kilometers, different realities, cultures, and intentions blend together. It is where luxury meets simplicity, where the European tourist crosses paths with the Thai vendor, where laughter mixes with the tired silence of those who work every day under the scorching sun. Therefore, in this video, the proposal is simple: to walk. Let my feet guide me, observe, listen, feel, and take you along on this journey. No filters, no cuts, with all the details that often go unnoticed. I want you to feel the city with me, to see not just the scenery, but the people, the sounds, the smells, the moments, because it is there, in the everyday, that the truth of any place resides. So before you continue with me, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment at the end, telling me if this Pattaya I saw is the same as the one you know, or if perhaps you, like me, are about to discover it for the first time. The heat was the first real impact when I set foot on Beach Road. It wasn't the inviting warmth of a paradise beach, the kind that appears on postcards with palm trees and blue skies. It was a dense, sticky, almost oppressive heat. The humidity seemed to cling to the skin, while the sun reflected harshly off the metallic surfaces of cars and the glass windows of the seaside building. And yet, there was something there that called out. A silent invitation to move forward and see closely what Pattaya really is. The sea to the left looked calm, but not completely clean. Small waves gently broke on the strip of sand, where a few people walked or simply observed the movement. It wasn't a magazine cover scene, but it had its own charm. The smell of the sea mixed with street food aroma, gasoline, and some sweet perfume from someone who hurried past me. And there it was, the first sensation. Everything happens quickly, all at once, in every direction. People walk in a continuous flow. Tourists from all over the world mingle with local workers, each following their own path. Older men walk slowly with small backpacks. Young people with phones in hand record everything around them. Thai women pass by on motorcycles with decorated helmets and market bags hanging from the handlebars. Each face seemed to tell a different story. And there I was, trying to absorb everything without haste. The sound of the city is a landscape in itself. There is a constant urban soundtrack that never stops. Impatient honks, tuk-tuk engines, music coming from shops, quick phrases exchanged in Thai, English, Russian, and even German. Beach Road is a boiling cultural melting pot, and this becomes evident within the first few minutes. It is impossible not to feel that you are in a place where the whole world seems to meet, even if for completely different reasons. On the right side of the sidewalk, commerce begins to show itself. Stalls with fresh fruits, small cafes with plastic tables, vendors offering tours and massages. Colorful signs advertise everything from cold beers to clothing sales, all in a cramped space, where every square meter seems to have a function and an owner. At every corner, something new to look at, smell, and hear. It is an avalanche of stimuli. The architecture follows this organized chaos. Some modern, mirrored buildings share space with older, poorly maintained constructions with faded signs. On the same block, you can see a four-star hotel, a cheap hostel, a currency exchange, and a pharmacy, all together, mixed up, functioning in their own way. There is no visible planning, but there is an order that seems to make sense only to those who live there. As I walk, I notice that I am being observed by a few. The looks are not of distrust, but of curiosity. There is something different about walking calmly through a city that is always in a hurry, perhaps because few stop to truly observe. Most tourists seem to move automatically, going from the hotel to the restaurant, from the restaurant to the bar, from the bar to the club. I, however, was there to see everything. And in this slowed-down rhythm, the city begins to reveal itself with more depth. Even at this early stage, Beach Road was already showing its essence. Contrast, it is impossible to ignore. On one side, luxury and sophistication. On the other, simplicity and improvisation. And in the midst of this, a city that does not try to hide its reality. It simply is. And it became clear to me that if I really wanted to understand Pattaya, I needed to keep walking, slowly, attentively, openly. I kept walking, and soon in the first few meters, I realized that each block of Beach Road holds its own universe. The energy of the city subtly changes as I move forward. It's not a sudden shift, but an almost imperceptible variation in the types of people, the sounds, the colors around me. And if at first the avenue seemed like just a chaotic mix, now a kind of urban logic began to unfold before me, sustained by local habits and small everyday ritual. The street vendors are the first to occupy my field of vision. Some set up their stalls with extreme precision, as if following a silent choreography that repeats every morning. Others are already in the midst of selling, calling out to tourists with a thick accent-laden English, but full of friendliness. Perfectly cut fruits, freshly prepared juices, skewers of shrimp being turned over the coals. It's an invitation to consume, but also a showcase of the creativity of those who live by improvisation. I stopped for a few seconds next to a cart selling cold coconut. The vendor, an older man with a broad smile, made a point of opening the coconuts with a few swift knife strokes. His sunburned face was marked by the wrinkles of time and labor. With a nod and a cold coconut, he offered me one. I accepted, and for a brief moment, I let the rhythm of the city engulf me. As I drank, I observed my surroundings more calmly. In front of me, a group of Thais was sweeping the sidewalk, cleaning the area in front of an electronics store. One of them wore a Barcelona jersey, while the other had worn-out flip-flops and a curved brim cap. They didn't talk much, just exchanged quick gestures. Further ahead, a young woman pushed a stroller while balancing a shopping bag on the other arm. This was the Pattaya that doesn't appear in tourist brochures, the one of routine, of work, of the heat faced every day. Even the tourists seemed to fall into this rhythm, even if just for moments. I saw a European couple standing in front of a display of local clothing, discussing prices with the saleswoman. They were using translation apps to try to understand each other. She smiled, pointed, typed on her phone, and showed the screen. He responded patiently while her husband waited seated on a concrete bench, fanning himself with a pamphlet. The contrast between the world of tourists and the lives of locals is constant, but somehow it seems to coexist without conflict. There's a curious coexistence there. No one seems to really mind the other. It's as if everyone accepts this informal agreement. The city belongs to everyone, at least for that moment. As I walked, I started paying more attention to the structure of the city. The sidewalks at many points were uneven, some poorly filled potholes, loose manhole covers, exposed electrical wires, but at the same time there was a visible effort to maintain a minimally functional appearance. Trash bins in strategic locations, visible police presence on some corners, informational signs in English and Thai. Passing by a pharmacy, I noticed the price of a sunscreen, the equivalent of almost 20 reais, more expensive than in many places in Brazil. Prices, by the way, vary quite a bit. At one kiosk, a bottle of water costs double what it does in a 7-Eleven. The logic seems simple. The closer to the sea, the more expensive. But no one complains much. Consumption here has a different rhythm. Everything is negotiable, and haggling is still a living art. Even amidst simplicity, there is dignity. The people I saw working there seemed proud of what they do. No one is just surviving. They are living, with all the limitations and all the small victories that each day offers. This was clear in every glance, every gesture, every small detail. These first blocks showed that Pattaya is not just a tourist destination. It is a space where lives happen, where the everyday pulses naturally, and walking there calmly was enough to understand that, before any judgment, it was necessary to observe, truly. without haste, without prejudice, just observe. As I continued my walk, the city began to change tone. The transition was not abrupt, but noticeable. The sound of music grew louder, the signs became more eye-catching, and the facades of the buildings more standardized. It was as if I was leaving the heart of everyday life and entering the showcase of Pattaya, the part of the city designed to enchant, seduce, and keep the tourist comfortable within their expectation. The hotels began to dominate the landscape. Large structures with English names, modern logos, entrances with glassed-in receptions, and uniformed staff. Some were imposing, with fountain, well-kept gardens, and balconies overlooking the sea. Others were more discreet, but still clearly prepared to welcome foreigners. And the most interesting thing is how everyone seemed to mold themselves to the same customer profile, the one who wants to be close to the action, but with a minimum of safety and comfort. Right next to the hotels, an endless array of restaurants. There was everything: Italian, Japanese, Indian, Mexican, American fast food, vegan food, and of course, a good variety of Thai dishes. The menus were displayed at the entrance, almost always with colorful photos of the dishes and prices in baht, dollars, and sometimes euros. It was evident that the target audience there was not the local resident. The waiters tried to attract passers-by with friendliness, waving menus in hand, speaking English with various accents. Some even risked a few words in Russian or Chinese, depending on the group passing by. There was a silent competition for attention, as if each restaurant was in constant competition with the one on the next corner. The diversity was impressive, but it also made clear how much the city had been shaped by the visitor's gaze. I entered a small cafe with cold air conditioning and a minimalist yet cozy decor. I ordered an iced coffee and sat near the window. Outside, the street continued to pulse with activity. It was curious to observe the contrast between the calm, air-conditioned interior and the heat and intense movement outside. Inside, everything was designed for comfort: free Wi-Fi, charging outlets for phones, smiling staff. The experience was thoughtfully crafted down to the smallest details to feel familiar to outsiders. Yet at the same time, it was hard not to notice that behind the welcoming facade, there was a logic of continuous sales. Everything was a showcase. The food was good, the service efficient, but nothing had the local soul that I had felt in the previous blocks. It was as if that part of the city had been carefully assembled to cater to the fantasies of visitors, and not to reflect the essence of Thailand. Still, it was impossible to ignore how much this structure drove the city. Jobs, income, development. And for many, this was the Pattaya that made sense, the one that offers comfort, practicality, and a carefully dosed touch of exoticism. Understanding this was also part of the journey. After all, to see the city as it truly is, you have to accept all its layers. It was precisely when I stepped out of that more touristy zone, with the cold cafes and bilingual menus, that the contrast began to hit harder. Within minutes, the atmosphere changed again. The hotels gave way to shorter buildings, some with weathered facades, peeling paint, and electrical wires hanging like makeshift webs. There were still tourists, of course, but now the number of locals visibly increased. The rhythm was different, rawer, more real. Pattaya has this unique characteristic of placing two worlds side by side that, in other contexts, would hardly touch. It's as if, upon turning a corner, you cross a portal that takes you from comfort to improvisation. On one side of the street, a resort with an infinity pool, room service, and a spa with exotic aroma. On the other, a modest boarding house with clothes hanging out of the windows and an elderly woman sweeping the sidewalk with a straw broom. There is no barrier between these two worlds. They coexist. They face each other every day. This contrast is not just architectural or financial. It is cultural. A type of silent tension hangs in the air. On one side, tourists in designer clothes, expensive accessories, and the latest generation smartphones. On the other, local workers in faded t-shirts, flip-flops, and always watchful eyes, not out of suspicion, but for survival. Here, the day does not end when the sun sets. For many, that's when it really begins. It's impossible to talk about Pattaya without mentioning sex tourism, although that is not the focus of this walk. Still, It is present, lurking in the subtext, in the discreet facades of certain establishments, in the glances that cross at specific corners. But the point here is not judgment, it's observation. And the truth is that there is a whole parallel economy operating on this logic, a network of people who live off this, directly or indirectly. Ignoring this would be omitting an important part of what makes Pattaya what it is. Amid this setting, I see young Thai women sitting on benches, smiling at passers-by. Some are looking at their phones, while others simply observe. There is no direct approach. Everything seems to function through implicit codes, almost invisible to those who are not attentive. But they are there, and they are part of the urban landscape just as much as the palm trees or the food stalls. Walking a little further, I come across a small temple, almost hidden between two buildings. Fresh flowers have been placed before the image of Buddha. The scent of incense lingers in the air, and an older man bows silently. I stand still for a few moments, watching from a distance. It feels like a subtle reminder. Despite the chaos and extremes, spirituality still finds space. Even there, amid the noise of motorcycles and beer advertisements, there are moments of silence, faith, and respect. Thailand is a deeply spiritual country. Buddhism is woven into everyday life, even in the most unlikely places. And this detail further reinforces the contrast of Pattaya, because while there is partying and commerce in all directions, there is also devotion, tradition, and a kind of silent balance between the old and the new, between the sacred and the mundane. By the end of this part of the walk, I began to realize how the city does not try to hide these opposites. They are not camouflaged, they are exposed, and perhaps it is this transparency that makes everything so unsettling for those who observe closely. Pattaya does not want to be perfect. It is what it is, without apology, without promising what it cannot deliver. And that, deep down, is what stands out the most. The courage to show itself completely, with all its excesses and all its shortcomings. For many, this mixture may seem incoherent. To me, it seemed human, deeply human. After observing the evident contrast between luxury and simplicity, between consumption and spirituality, I turned my focus to the people. Because in the end, they are the ones who bring any city to life. And Pattaya, more than its buildings, beaches, or bars, is made of people. People of all kinds, coming from all corners, living completely distinct realities, but sharing the same urban space. The first conversation happened without me planning it. I was standing at an intersection waiting for the traffic light to change when a Thai man struck up a conversation. He spoke English with difficulty but made an effort to be understood. He asked where I was from, if I liked Thailand, and what I was doing alone, walking around Pattaya with a camera hanging around my neck. I responded with the basic, and he smiled. He said he worked as a private driver and that, even after years in the city, he was still amazed by the number of new people arriving every day. Every day there's someone different. Pattaya never sleeps, he said, and he gave me a pat on the shoulder before moving on. That simple and brief exchange stayed in my mind for a long time, because it captured something essential. Pattaya is not just a destination for those coming from outside, but also home to those who make this place function, and those faces that often go unnoticed, the ones who serve food, who clean the sidewalks, who drive the tuk-tuks, are a fundamental part of this machinery. I kept walking and started to pay even more attention. I saw a lady sitting in a plastic chair in the shade of a tree. She was selling handmade flowers, the kind used for offerings at temples. She had slender, nimble fingers and a serene face. When she noticed I was watching her, she smiled. She didn't offer me anything, she just smiled. That gesture, in that context, said a lot. It was like a silent acknowledgement that we were there, sharing the same moment, even without speaking the same language. Further along, a group of young Russian tourists was trying to negotiate with a tuk-tuk driver. They were laughing loudly, talking among themselves, and showing the destination on Google Maps. The driver gestured, made signals with his fingers, and in the end, they all seemed to understand each other. The scene was almost comedic, but at the same time revealing. In the absence of words, there was a willingness to communicate, and that, in itself, is already a powerful bridge. In front of a small bar, I saw a Thai woman sitting next to a child. She seemed to be waiting for someone or just passing the time. The child was playing with a colorful plastic toy, making sounds with his mouth. No words were exchanged between us, but the scene brought to mind a simple truth. Even in the midst of a city so focused on tourists, life goes on. Mothers take care of their children. Children play. People wait, rest, live. These small encounters, these anonymous faces, make up a patchwork that says much more about Pattaya than any tourist attraction. It is there, in the unpretentious gesture, in the exchanged glance, in the quiet routine, that the soul of the city resides. Walking through Pattaya is not just about observing facades and contrast. It is, above all, about crossing paths with stories that happen on the margins of what is shown in travel guide. And if you are willing to see with attention, you will realize that the true treasures of this place are in the details, in the silent smiles, in the brief conversations, in the humanity that persists amid the chaos. The light began to change slowly. First, almost imperceptibly, as if the sun were just taking a break after hours of intense heat. But gradually, everything started to take on another color. Beach roads, so lively during the day, began to dress in golden and orange hues, with elongated shadows. The late afternoon in Pattaya is not just a change in brightness, it is a change in atmosphere, in rhythm, in energy. The noise of the city remains, but begins to change tone. The horns still sound, but less impatiently. The conversations in the streets become more spaced out, more drawn out. The heat is still present, but milder, more bearable. And with that, the city seems to breathe in a different way. There is a pause, a kind of silent transition between day and what is to come. People begin to gather on the sidewalk by the shore to watch the sunset. Some sit on the concrete wall that separates the sidewalk from the sand. Others just lean against it, with bottles of water or cups of beer, observing. There is something almost ritualistic about this moment. The sky is slowly painted, and even those who don't seem to pay much attention to the scenery end up being drawn to it. It is impossible to ignore the beauty of this light filtered through the thin clouds that cut across the Thai sky. On the sand, small groups of friends are chatting. Some children are still playing near the water. A man walks with a dog, while another adjusts a fishing net, looking out at the sea as if calculating the exact time to return to work. Everything seems to slow down, as if Pattaya also needed a break before the next phase. The artificial lights begin to appear. The poles along the shore light up in sequence, creating a thin line of white glow on the sidewalk. Signs from bars and restaurants begin to flash in red, blue, and green. Soft music starts to come from speakers. It is not loud enough to dominate the environment, but it is already a clear sign. The night is coming, and with it, another Pattaya. Observing this moment, I realize that it carries something special. The sunset seems to be the only moment of the day when the city does not impose itself. It simply is. It doesn't try to sell, seduce, or entertain. It just exists, in silence. And in that silence, those who observe with attention can capture the most important transition of the day. The one in which the city changes its face, sheds its skin, and reveals a new identity. It is in this atmosphere that I keep walking. Night is approaching, and along with it, the promise of a different kind of movement. More intense, more eye-catching, more unpredictable. The Pattaya of the day begins to say goodbye, while a new version of the city prepares to take control. As night falls completely, Pattaya takes on another form. What was once a bustling city, still within the confines of daytime routine, now becomes a kind of living stage. Beach Road lights up with pulsating signs, neon lights, bar lights, and small spotlights thrown onto sidewalks to attract passers-by. It was as if a second shift of the city began there, bolder, noisier, more direct. The first thing that changes is the sound. The city's soundtrack transforms. What was once urban noise, motorcycles, voices, horns, now mixes with electronic beats, pop music, and even classic rock playing at high volume in the bars that are starting to fill up. The invitations become more insistent. Happy hour, my friend? Beer for 60 baht? Come, come, good music. The staff, now in colorful shirts or flashy outfits, try to lure tourists with broad smiles and promises of fun. The flow of people doubles, perhaps even triples. Solo men, couples, groups of friends, young Thais mingling with foreigners of all ages. The street develops its own rhythm, almost like a river flowing without a fixed direction. The sidewalk that once allowed for a leisurely stroll now demands more attention. There are more bodies, more voices, more distractions, and, along with that, the feeling that anything can happen at any moment. I saw a group of tourists sitting at an open bar, laughing loudly with empty bottles already lined up on the table. Next to them, a street musician sang a cover of Bob Marley, with a straw hat thrown on the ground to collect coins. A little further ahead, two men were haggling prices with a motorcycle taxi driver. It was an uninterrupted sequence of small scenes, each with its own story, all coexisting in the same space. The presence of sensuality also intensifies. There are more glances, more gestures. Some women, dressed provocatively, stroll in groups or position themselves at strategic points on the street. Some bars have pole dances, red lights, louder music. Everything there is explicit, but not blatant. Pattaya at night doesn't pretend to be what it's not. It shows its more straightforward, rawer side, more focused on pleasure and consumption. And this can both fascinate and frighten. In the midst of all this intensity, it's easy to understand why the city attracts many and repels others. For some, it's an adult playground where everything seems allowed. For others, a jungle of excess that's hard to decipher. But for those who observe carefully, there are more nuances there than one might think. Amid the glow of the neon signs and the strong smell of drinks and fried food, there are exhausted workers, young people looking for opportunity, lonely foreigners, couples seeking adventure, and even those who just want to listen to music and have a cold beer after a hot day. I also saw the other side of that night. Men sitting alone on benches, staring into the void. Young people visibly drunk being supported by friends. An older foreign man being helped by a staff member after feeling ill on the sidewalk. It's these small cracks in the shine of the night that show that not everything is a party. There is a price behind the continuous fun, and not everyone can afford it emotionally. Still, there is something magnetic about this illuminated darkness, a kind of energy that cannot be explained, only felt. Pattaya at night is unpredictable. It envelops you, confuses you, provokes you, and if you're not careful, it can swallow you whole. But if you're willing to look beyond the surface, there's much to learn there. About humanity, about desire, about loneliness, about coexistence. I kept walking. I didn't enter any bars. I didn't accept the invitations. I didn't stop at any eye-catching corner. I just observed. And in the midst of that organized chaos, I understood that the night in Pattaya is not just about partying or excess. It's a mirror, a distorted reflection of everything we carry when we think we're just traveling. After hours of walking along Beach Road, feeling the day turn into night, observing people, landscapes, and rhythm, I realized that this experience went far beyond a simple urban exploration. It wasn't about tourism, about capturing beautiful images or collecting curiosities. It was about present, being there truly, attentive to what the city wanted to show me, and to what it doesn't always strive to hide. Pattaya, with all its contradictions, is a place that challenges superficial views. It invites you to judge, to create quick labels, to decide whether you like it or not based on just a few minutes of observation. But if you resist that impulse and keep walking, keep looking, it starts to reveal other layers, layers that don't fit into stereotypes. A city is not just what it proudly displays, nor is it just what others insist on condemning. A city is, above all, an organism made of people, and people are complex. Walking through Pattaya without filters confronted me with some of my own ideas. The expectation of finding something exotic and surprising dissipated almost immediately. Instead, I found something much more powerful, the everyday reality of a place that lives by adapting, by showing itself available, but that also has its own identity, its own pains, its own limits. It cannot be romanticized. There are evident problems here: inequality, exploitation, excess. But there is also dignity, resilience, and beauty in the details. I saw people trying to live the best way they can. I saw moments of silence amidst the noise. I saw humanity where many only see commerce. Walking through Pattaya was an exercise in empathy. It forced me to listen more than to speak, to observe more than to judge, to respect more than to understand. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson this place left me. Not everything needs to make sense to have value. Sometimes, just being there, open, is enough. Reaching the end of this walk felt like closing a cycle. I started the day curious, willing to observe Pattaya without hurry, without filters, with more attentive eyes than ever. And I end with the feeling that, despite the hours spent, there is still much to see, much to understand, much to digest. This city cannot be summed up in a video, nor in a walk. It imposes itself with a complexity that only time, coexistence, and real listening can reach. The goal here has never been to convince you to like or dislike Pattaya, much less to define what is right or wrong in what it offers. What I wanted, and I hope I succeeded, was to show a sincere, unfiltered glimpse of a place that is often reduced to cliches, to show that behind the lights, the parties, and the tourist smiles, there is a living city, made up of routines, daily battles, and stories that are not always told. If you have made it this far, walking with me on this journey, I thank you, because more than just seeing beautiful images, you chose to look at a city with depth. You were willing to see what normally passes quickly by the window of a car or through the feed of a social network, and that, in itself, changes everything. Pattaya is plural, it is intense, it is contradictory, and that is what makes it real. It does not fit into ready-made formulas. It cannot be explained with a caption, and perhaps that is why so many people return, not because they understood, but because they still have questions. If you know Pattaya, I want to know, was this the city you saw too? Or did you have a completely different experience? If you have never been here, did this walk spark your curiosity? Or did it make you feel strange? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know how all of this resonated on the other side of the screen. And of course, if you like this way of exploring places in a more human, down-to-earth way, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. I am already preparing new destinations, always with the same perspective, that of real observation, without filters or artificial scripts. Pattaya taught me that the best way to know a place is to walk through it, and that sometimes walking slowly says more than any travel guide. Thank you for accompanying me this far. I'll see you on the next journey.